Okay, we're here with Mr. Bernard Kessler. Can you hold that up again? There you go. And the date is June 25th, 2015. Okay, you're good. And we're here with Patsy Costello and Bernie Kessler, and we're going to do a little oral interview here for the Historical Society, the Town of Hyde Park Historical Society. And first of all, I want to thank you for doing this.
You're
and
very
the tour of
welcome.
your house. Your house is lovely.
Thank you.
And I don't know a lot about your story, so you're going to have to fill me in on everything.
Oh my goodness. Patsy could tell you probably more about me than I remember.
Are you a native of Hyde Park?
I was born in Hyde Park on Crum Elbow Road. Yes. My parents had a farm there. We had a 122-acre dairy farm they ran, and we had chickens, ducks. We raised the white Pekin ducks there for the Long Island Duck Market.
Wow.
We'd ship them down there. So we had ducks all over the place because we had a nice big creek running through the farm. And we had a nice pond there for swimming. And we had a couple hundred chickens. And we ran about a total of top 40 milch cows. Milch, M-I-L-C-H, you know, that's the way it's pronounced it. Milch cows. And one bull. We had when they gave birth to calves, we'd fatten the calves for 30 days, and that would be milk-fed veal. So we got a little higher price for that. Milk, and I remember when I started milk cows, I was about 12. My brother was 14, Sid. You remember Sid. The greatest brother anybody could ever have. And you probably remember Sid yet, John. No, you do.
He was my bus driver.
Yeah, he did. And you know what he did? He was 18 when he started driving the bus. And he got paid $82 per month. And I was just entering college at St. John's in September 1940. And he would turn over his bus driver's check to me so I could pay my tuition.
Wow, that was nice.
He gave me his whole $82 check. And I went to St. John's College or University of Arts and Sciences. And then the war broke out in December of 1941, as you know. And everybody had to sign up for the draft. So I immediately signed up, and the county agricultural agent came around. I don't remember if you remember him. Albert Shepard, his name was. County agricultural agent. He says, you two guys cannot go in the draft. You have to stay on the farm and produce 150 units per year each. And I'll recommend to the draft board that you and Sid get a 2C classification so the government can't touch you. You stay on the farm and produce, and every month I would check up on you to see if you produce. He would come around every month. He was the father-in-law of Dave Ring, the real estate man. You remember Dave Ring. And I said, how am I going to go to school? He said, that's up to you. I said, St. John's is down in Brooklyn. I said, well, maybe if you try, you can make it, but I'm going to be around every month. If you're not producing, the next step is in the Army or Navy. I'll have them revoke your 2C classification. I said, oh, Sid, my father was so happy that he'll have the two sons still on the farm. You know what it is, you know what Walt went through. So, what I did, I traveled back and forth every day. It was 5 o'clock in the morning in the barn, milking cows by hand. We didn't have machines then. And my old clothes on and old boots and everything. Then I run back in the house, change my clothes. Sid would jump in the old jalopy. I didn't have a license yet. I was 17. So Sid would drive me down to Poughkeepsie Railroad Station. I'd make the 20 to 8 train. I was Grand Central about 9:30. I'd get on a subway to St. John's, which was then in Borough Hall, Brooklyn. I'd get my classes all in. I'd make the 2 o'clock train out of Grand Central back to Poughkeepsie. Sid would pick me up at the station unless I met somebody there that would drive me home. And I did that for 4.5 years. Every day back and forth to school. I went right through the summer, and I made college and law school in 4.5 years.
Wow.
While doing my homework on the train. It's the only time I had. And I was happy as a lark. I was so happy what I was doing. And it meant nothing to travel back and forth every day. It was great. I had an hour and a half or so to do my homework.
It's amazing.
And I passed everything. I was admitted to the bar. I was 22 years old. Tomorrow is my 70th anniversary for practicing law in New York State.
Well, congratulations.
Wow.
Tomorrow, June 26th, I was admitted June 26, 1945. And now tomorrow is my great 70th anniversary.
Wow.
So I've been practicing law for 70 years. So finally, after that many years, I finally got it straight.
It was Sid your only brother or sister?
Sid was my only brother. I had 2 sisters, both predeceased me, of course. And unfortunately, I had 2 good sisters. We all worked hard on the farm. You know what a farm work is.
Yes.
You
I
saw
do.
what Tom and Bob and Jack all went through. And they still couldn't save the farm. He had 5 sons, Walter, didn't they?
They had 6, but one passed away
Right.
when he was young.
Tom Gilbert and I were good friends all through high school. We went to Stafford High School together. And Bob and I used to meet once in a while at the Poughkeepsie Railroad Station when he was going to NYU. So he would travel down to New York too. So we had a good, close relationship. Walt Gilbert and my dad bought cows and sold cows to each other on occasion. So they had a good relationship.
Well, obviously you were very close with your brother.
Oh, Sid was the greatest guy in the whole world. What he did for me is impossible to write enough about him.
It's really nice.
When we would work in the barn, he knew I was tired from traveling and so on. He would sneak out the back door of the farmhouse to get into the barn before I got there too, and he would start the chores. Like in the wintertime, bringing them the hay down from the mow, feeding and getting their feed set up out of the feed bin, cleaning out the drops from the manure. He tried to sneak that in first so I would have less to do.
Mm.
And filling the insulage bags and all that. So he was the greatest help in the whole world and drove me back and forth, did everything for me that he could, besides his own load. Because then we plowed fields by horses. So Sid did all the plowing. And you know what that is, we didn't have good soil there, a lot of stones. So when the plow's going along and hits a rock, up goes you're holding on to the plow and Sid's flying through the air, you know. So we had a tough time on the farm, and I remember the 1930s, and Roosevelt remembers that too, I'm sure. That's when he ran for office in the early 30s, and we were getting 2 cents a quart for milk. 2 cents a quart. So we were losing money, like that song, you know, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. So, but we had to sell, we had to milk the cows. You don't milk a cow, they go dry. And if you don't breed a cow, they don't have a calf. You don't have a calf, they don't give milk. So all that had to be attended to. We had to keep a record. You know, cows were only in heat for 3 weeks out of a year. So that's the only time they could become inseminated. Of course, now they have artificial insemination. It's all different.
Where did you sell the milk?
Well, we canned it in 20-gallon cans, put it out by the roadside on a milk bench that we had, and Dairy Lee would come along with their own milk truck and pick it up. So we never knew how many quarts we had in there. We had to take their word for it anyway. They were still jipping us even at 2 cents a quart.
That's a lot.
And then, of course, you got paid a bonus if you had very rich milk. So when I heard we had some Jerseys besides the Holsteins and Guernseys. Jersey would give rich milk, so you get a bonus for that, maybe a quarter of a cent, whatever it was. And we had to, of course, clean our own pails out. Every time you milk, you got to scrub the pails because the health inspector would come around and inspect all the milk implements that we used. They had to be scrubbed clean. And then we had to cool it in the summertime because you milk it to 5 to 6 and they don't pick it up until the following morning. So we had to have it cool and have ice in it. So we made our own ice on our own pond and we had ice for the milk cooler.
Right.
So
You never
it
think
was
of any
tough.
of
It
all
was
this
tough.
stuff, yeah.
We had no electric on the farm when I went to public school. I went to the one-room schoolhouse on Netherwood Road. No longer there. They moved it back and made a house out of it. You probably know that. And one-room schoolhouse. We walked 1 mile each way. When I was 5 years of age, I and Sid was 7. We walked up to the school 1 mile, 1 mile back, no matter what the weather was. We never missed a day because of the weather. Couldn't walk through the snow, so luckily the snow, the guy down Dairy, Harold Lane, who would pick up the milk, he'd have a dual-wheel truck to pick it up, so we walked in his tracks to go up to school because he drove up to the Four Corners, then we had to walk through the snow on the Four Corners up Netherwood Hill there, right opposite where the Netherwood School is now. So we did that, and then we were so prompt, so the teacher used to come there also, and Anna Van Rensselaer, I don't know if you remember that name. She would come by sleigh in the wintertime. Her husband would drive her by horse and sled. And she would get there and start the stove up in the wintertime, wood stove, of course. So stood in the middle of the room, and all 8 grades were in one room. No bigger than these 2 rooms together. That was the whole school. Heated by wood. I don't know if you want to hear this or not.
Yeah,
This is
sure.
really interesting.
So the school district appointed my brother Sid, he was about 12 also at the time, to start the stove in the morning to get this room warmed up. And they paid him $5 a year. They said, we'll pay you $5 a year for the season to start the fire up every morning. So he did it. I'll work and work. He never got the $5 even.
You never got the money?
Never got the $5. The school district treasurer kept it.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. Now, Bernie, how about your mother and father? What were their names?
Saul Kessler, S-A-U-L, and Esther, E-S-T-H-E-R. Very hard-working, dedicated, loving people. And they settled in Hyde Park in November 1919.
And where did they come from?
Originally they came from Russia. Well, actually, I think it was one of those other small countries that was owned by Russia. And they escaped the pogroms, the Jewish people. So the Russians, Kazakhs were coming and stealing they had farm, and they made bricks there. They had a stream with a clay bank, so they'd make and bake bricks. And they'd buy chickens, and the Russian Kazakhs on their horses would come and steal the chickens and eggs and ride off again. So they figured they got to leave. So they lived in different towns, and one was in Minsk, and I don't remember the other one. So they came from Lithuania, Russia area, and my father described coming over in the ship. Of course, they were third class in the hold of the ship, and that was full of roaches and mice and rats and everything. So he said we had boots, and we have to stick a hand in the boots and pull up a handful of lice out of there, because they came over the hold of the ship. But they made it. They got to New York City with their siblings. And my father started a business with his brother, Sam. They started manufacturing at age 17. They started manufacturing women's coats. You know, all the Jewish people in the Lower East Side, cloaks and suits. And they did pretty well. They were young kids. They were both under 20. And my father had a yearning though for the farm because he came off a farm where they had the chickens and so on. So they came up by, I think it was by train to Poughkeepsie, and then they had a horse and wagon, drove them out through East Park, Crum Elbow Road, which was then a dirt road. I remember the days when we walked to school, as I told you before, there was grass growing in the middle of the road, because where the tires went then, till it was paved over. And so they came in November 1919. Poor, but they bought 122 acres with an old farmhouse, some old barns. My father was handy, very handy. My father could have built anything from plumbing, electrical work, mason work, carpentry work. He and Sid did it all. And Sid was a youngster. I helped out. I carried them to water in the summertime. Where to get water? Out of the creek. Yeah, a creek or a spring. We were out in the field working or something, hoeing the corn and potatoes. We had a little spring bubbling up. We drank from there. There's a snake comes by, a frog is in the water, or the algae. Didn't matter. You press it on the side and take a drink. I want to
No
tell you.
bottled water then.
So we had a good time. And I went to college and law school, and I graduated, as I told you, and I was admitted June 26, 1945. And let's see what else I could tell you. I'm trying to keep it.
Tell us about your mother. I
mother,
met your father. He used to come to our house.
Right.
With the Roosevelt Home Club.
Right.
But
My mother died at a very early age. My mother died, unfortunately, at age 45.
Oh,
that's young.
She worked so hard. She worked day and night. I remember 2 o'clock in the morning that she was still ironing the sheets or whatever. And she never stopped working. Never took care of herself. Never saw a doctor. On August 30th, she all right?
Yeah.
You want anything?
No, we're fine.
On August 30th, 1941, before the Second World War broke out, she woke up one morning and said she didn't feel well. She got an awful headache. Awful headache. So I went up to her bed and Mark, can I give you something? She has a little cold orange juice. I gave her a little cold orange juice and she immediately vomited. Her eyes rolled back. She had a stroke. So he called Dr. Kronk. You remember him, I'm sure. You remember Dr. James Kronk. I think it was James M. Kronk, I'm not sure.
he had an office at my house at one time.
That's it. So he came out, he said, you better call the ambulance, she's not in good condition, she's having a stroke. So the ambulance came from Bassin, they drove it down. Within 15 minutes they called, and those old phone we had, those crank-up phones. Saul Kessler, yes, your wife is gone. Just like that.
That's why I never met your mother.
You never met her?
At
She
45?
died at 45 years of age.
Oh, that's terrible.
It was awful. And I was, my first year at college, I just finished. I was then 18. And I didn't want to leave my father and brother and sisters on the farm. I said, I'm not going back to college. Yeah, I can't leave you guys here. So Sid said, you gotta go, you gotta go. I got my bus driving job and I'll help you pay. I used to pay the college at that time $16 every 2 weeks. That was my tuition. Sometimes when I went back and forth in nice weather, this is funny. People can't believe it. I got on the subway at St. John's for 5 cents. Subway was 5 cents. It took me from Brooklyn always up White Plains Road line to the northern part of the Bronx. And there you get a slip to get onto a bus for the same 5 cents. You could transfer the bus. And that bus took me up to Tarrytown. Tarrytown on my 9G, I would hitchhike the rest of the way. I was so lucky, 1 day a week. I didn't do that every day because I would go on the train, which only was $1.20, I think. So I would hitchhike every day, and there was the same guy who picked me up the first time. He says, I'm coming back here again. I think it was on a Friday. I'll pick you up again. I said, great. So he picked me up for all through the summer. on one day a week, so I saved $1.20.
That's great.
My lunches, when I went to college, I had to hit on the run because I had to make the train. I remember they had a milk bar out there, someplace near Grand Central. I have a chocolate drink with 2 crullers. That was my lunch every day. 15 cents.
15 cents.
15 cents. People wouldn't believe that.
Starving student.
And everybody could tell that tale of hardship, and I didn't consider it a hardship. I considered it an honor that I'm able to work on the farm and go to school. Who ever heard of such a thing? And my friends are getting killed in the war. Remember, I don't know if you remember Newt Hoover.
I know who he was.
You know who he was, and what's his name? Ray. Emma Pitkin Simpson Marshall.
Emma Victoria Pitkin Marshall.
I think she had a name of Victoria. Emma Pitkin Simpson Marshall. Yeah.
Wow.
She lived there on Cromwell, right across the street from Barry Memorials now. She was an active Democrat too.
She was. She wrote a book of poetry about FDR.
Yeah. Well, she had a nephew, Ray. Can't remember his last
Travis?
name. Was it Travis? No, there is a Ray Travis in Hyde Park. Well, he got killed in the war.
Oh, I know who you mean.
Yeah. He was a big husky kid.
We met his sister. Trying to think of his last name. Was it not Conklin? It was started with a C.
Maybe I'll think about it and see what I can
Ray.
And so a lot of guys that I know got killed. Vincent Antiski lived out there in Rusky Lane. So Sid and I felt badly. Here we are just fooling around on the farm, and those guys are out on the fighting line. But
I don't think you were fooling around. I think you were working really hard.
oh, we were working hard. But at that age, you know, you got a lot of testosterone. You're willing to go, you know.
So you graduated from college.
I graduated from college, and while I was sometimes in college, I took 3 weeks off from going home, and Sid carried the burden because I had to study for the exams, final exams. So during that period of time, instead of just studying, I got a job clerking in a law office. Big law firm. There were 20 lawyers there, which was a big firm in those days. Now there's hundreds. So I got a job there, and what did they get me to do? Serving summonses and dispossesses, which was good. They give me 10 cents to go on the subway there and back to serve it. I put the 10 cents in my pocket and walked away. I had a map of New York City and Brooklyn, where their office was. I made another 10 cents. And I get paid 75 cents for each summon I served. So I was making big money. I made 1 week about 12 bucks. So I did that, and after I graduated, I stayed on with them because they were paying me. They raised me to about $30 a week, full time. Well, that was big money. Anyway, what I wanted to do was become an FBI agent. So I applied to the FBI while I was still in law school. And I filled out the application. I went down and took the exam. And I didn't hear from them. So, for a long time I don't hear what happened to my application. I wanted to be a special agent. See, all special agents are lawyers. So I thought I'll be a lawyer, I'll be, and they paid $3,000 a year then. $60 a week. I said, how can I make that kind of money? $60 a week, wow, I'd be rich. So I applied, still don't hear from them. Then, about over a year later, I got a letter from J. Edgar Hoover. I still have it. It's dated January 5th, 1945. Dear Mr. Kessler, Bernard Kessler, Hyde Park, New York. No zip.
No street address.
Receipt is acknowledged of your letter of December 29, 1944, with further reference to your application on file for appointment to the position of Special Agent in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I said, boy, I read that. That sounds good. You are advised that the rules regarding re-examinations are strictly adhered to and cannot be waived. If you are still interested in the possibility of securing an application, we will communicate with the Bureau, and we'll then give you an opportunity to retake the examination. I said, what'd you say? Well, how come you didn't mark what I had? So I called him up. J. Edgar Hoover, he signed it. I called him up and I made a note on the back of the letter. Listen to this. You were not 21 years old when you applied, so we turned you down.
What was the date of the letter?
The date of the letter is January 5th, 1945. He didn't answer for about a year.
Yeah.
So I was only 20.
So by 1945, were you 21?
I was 21, and that's why he said I could retake another test. I got all dressed up to take that test.
Okay. He's going to take a copy of the letter.
It's going to show the signature. I think that's interesting. There's a signature.
This is a signature. That's his signature, J. Edgar Hoover. But I reached him in person when I called up. We didn't mark your exam because you weren't 21. So I said to myself, what's the matter with our FBI? Didn't they see when the application came in I wasn't 21?
I think they saw that you were from Hyde Park, and J. Edgar Hoover did not like the Roosevelt.
Well, that's a thought.
I think that's the whole thing. They knew Hyde Park, New York.
Oh, I don't know, maybe.
What do you think?
I don't think that's... I know they didn't like each other.
Yeah, and he had a huge file about Eleanor Roosevelt.
I know that. I realize that. I know.
Right.
I'll
bet you
that.
when he saw that at Hyde Park, he was going to make it difficult.
Well,
So you never reapplied?
I never replied because then I came to Hyde Park and I started practicing law.
That was your first law practice in Hyde Park?
What's that?
Was your first law practice in Hyde Park?
No, I was in New York.
Or New York?
I practiced in New York for a while, and I got experience. I came to Hyde Park more experienced. And while I was practicing in Hyde Park, I still maintained an office in New York because I had people there yet. And I had judges were appointed me to defend people, poor people.
So what kind of law did you practice?
Everything. I did everything. Civil, criminal, anything that came away from A to Z. And I'll tell you what I can do for you. I could give you the minutes. And I'm going to take the time to read it. This is a transcript of when I was on by the bar at this Lord Day dinner. I have the whole transcript here. And you'll see what Judge Samarco said about me. He worked for me for 18 years.
Wow.
And then while he was working for me, I pushed him to run for town judge. So he sat there over 15 years, and I kept pushing him to run. Even though I was a Democrat, he was a Republican, but he was a very competent lawyer. He knew the town. He was a West Point graduate, a good friend. And then when it came to family court opening, I said, Val, take it.
Good.
So in his speech, you should see what he said to me about the speech. You got to take it. I'll give this to you.
Okay.
Read
You
it.
want us to make a copy and give it back to you?
No, I think I have another copy.
You do?
If it's easy for you, you could do that.
Okay.
But
Sure.
Val there said, when he worked for me, he said, Bernie could handle anything. Any kind of case that came along, which I did, whether civil, criminal, murder, or assault, or negligence, or accident, I handled everything.
Wow. You
And
don't see
anybody could do that if you're a workaholic. In the law practice, you don't win your cases in the courtroom. You win them in the field when you bring the evidence in. You gather the evidence. You got the facts. I would pound people so much to get all the facts out of them. I was good at that. Val said there in his notes, he said when Bernie cross-examined a witness, sometimes the witness started to think maybe I'm not being truthful.
You must have been very good.
I was very good at cross-examination. I was very good on my feet. And in fact, I was in New York City one time I was assigned a case to defend a Cuban. At that time we had relations with Cuba, way back when. He was importing drugs into the United States. He was a sailor, so he tied the drugs inside the stack of the ship. And then when he came to New York to unload, he'd have to get a ladder to get back into the chimney of the ship to get it out of there. So he's come down the ladder, and who's there but Treasury agents and FBI? So they picked him up, and so the judge assigned me to defend that case. Okay. And I think we made $50 a day on that. That was big money in those days. So I'm picking the jury. And one woman in the jury gets up and says, Judge, may I ask Mr. Kessler a question? Judge said, yes. Mr. Kessler, you're such a nice young man. How can you defeat this obviously guilty man? Oh, gee, what experience that was. Judge said, I declare mistrial. Goodbye, jury.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It could have poisoned the rest of the jury, right? And it shows she already made up her mind and we're just selecting them.
Jeez.
So I had experiences like that, and we had a judge here, as you know, Patsy, maybe you remember too, Pam. Judge Aldrich, Ray Aldrich. I was defending a murder case before him. It was the second round. The first case was tried by Judge Adis, the Gene Bach murder case. You remember when Gene Bach on Rogers Road? Rogers Place Road? Shot her husband. So I didn't defend her originally. It was Ed Miller who did, and he goofed up the case. So Ida Steele, her husband was George Steele. You remember he was a commissioner.
He was a highway commissioner or something, wasn't he?
Yeah. So she hired me, said, Bernie, you got to help Jean out. She's sitting in Bedford now. We don't think she got a fair trial. I said, from what I hear, she didn't. Please take on and get her a new trial and retry the case. Now, I took an impossible task even with Jean Bach. I mean, they had so many witnesses against her, and she made her own confessions. And that was their undoing for the case. When Ray Barada was the DA, Charlie Borges was the deputy sheriff. Remember Charlie Borges? John Heilman, the assistant DA. Let's see, who else was there that time? That's
12 o'clock.
12 o'clock, right? Okay. Time goes past when you're having fun.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Is this all right with you?
Oh,
Am I
this is
doing all
good.
right?
Yeah.
We didn't talk about Roosevelt yet. I got to tell you this because this is good. Should I make a motion for a new trial? And it goes before Jadis, who was the trial judge. He says, I can't hear it. I was the trial judge. He gets out of the case. Goes to Ray Aldrich. I said, okay, now I'm before Ray Aldrich, Judge. I want a hearing. And I want to subpoena in Judge Ray Barada, the DA, John Heilman, Charlie Borges, and somebody else, I can't remember his name. They're all going to be witnesses. I said, you can't call them as witnesses. I can, Judge. He says, if you pursue that, he says, I'm going to hold you in contempt. Judge, I'm pursuing it. He says, I'm going to hold you in contempt. I'm warning you. I'm warning you, Bernie. I'll have the court officers take you out. I said, Judge, I am pursuing it. I want to call Ray Barada as a witness, the DA. This has to do with the guilt or innocence on a murder charge. You want to deprive me of my right to call witnesses in that defense? You're not doing right, Judge. I hereby hold you in contempt. Okay, everybody's jumping in the courtroom. I said, Judge, you're holding me in contempt. In your presence, I'm entitled to immediate hearing, aren't I? He said, yes, you are. He says, are you ready for your hearing? I say, yes, I am. He says, call your first witness. I said, Judge, take the stand. You're my first witness. It happened in the courtroom. You saw what happened. Take the stand. Oh, he's going wild there. He doesn't know what to do. Finally, he calmed down, and he says, okay, I'm recusing myself from the case. I'm stepping off the bench. The whole comedy started. The administrative judge, Judge Joseph Gagliotti, you remember him too. He had over all the 52 judges in the area, 9th Judicial District. He said, Bernie, what are you fooling around up there? Try your case. We got to move this case. It's an old case. All right, Judge. Give me a judge. All right. They don't have another county court judge. Ray Aldrich was the only county court judge. So they import William Christiana from Columbia County to come down. He comes down. He says, what's the case about? We explained to him, me and the DA. And he said, Mr. Kessler, how long will this hearing take? I said, 2 months. I have a lot of witnesses. 2 months. He said, I'm not staying 2 months. This is now June. He said, I got my vacation planned. I'm taking my family away. I'm stepping out of the case.
Wow.
Another one.
Another William Christiana.
Hits the dust.
Dropping like flies.
So Edward Thompson, the administrative judge there, he says, what are you doing, Brian? What are you doing to the court system? You know, I'm questioning your ethics. I said, Judge, I'm doing everything I can to properly defend my client. Well, I'm going to send that. He says, I'm not sending any more judges up. I'm coming up myself. Administrative judge coming up. He's going to give me the business, boy. Big judge over 9th Judicial District. He comes up. We talk and talk. I told him what my defenses are. He says, you know, I'm an administrative judge. I have a lot of administration to do it. He comes up from White Plains. I can't take the time to listen to all this over a couple of months. I'm stepping out of the case. So he goes away. Finally, the chief judge from the appellate division in Brooklyn, who has jurisdiction, he calls me up. I tell him what's happening. I got to defend my client. I want to call my witnesses. This is crazy. So the appellate division chief judge says, I'm sending up a best trial judge we have here on the appellate division. He's a former criminal court trial lawyer. There'll be no nonsense with him. I said, that's right. I don't want any nonsense. I want justice. And half justice, only half injustice too. So I want justice, you know. So they send up a guy named Harry Gittleson, a very well-known trial lawyer who just got on the bench. He calls us up. I cut out a lot of the facts that I had by telling you this. And he says, gets on the bench, you ready, Mr. Kessler? I am. Actually, my opponent then was the DA. Well, they had a couple of assistant DAs there at the time, which was against me. Wasn't Roosevelt. Some guy before me. Can't remember. Anyway, he calls us up. I tell him my case. And he says, we're not going to retry this case. We're getting rid of it right now. Counselor Kessler, he says to me, you want to plead guilty to something? I said, sure. How long she served? I think she served about 3 years already down at women's prison. I sentenced her to time served. Goodbye.
Wow.
Wow.
Listen to this sequel, though. I get her out. I free her. I did a lot of other things in between, and I'm not going into no detail about that. Because I did get her out on the stand, by the way. I could tell you about that, too. So we walk out of court. She gets a furnished room to live in, someplace off Cannon Street in Poughkeepsie. And she's eating in Murray's Luncheonette, which was on Market Street, right across from the courthouse. Not Alex's, but next to it was Murray's. and he's a married man, but she falls in love with him. So they're having a good affair for about 6 months. Okay, no big deal. She wasn't on probation or anything. So he tells her, Jean, I'm going back to my wife. We're finished. She gets very upset. She goes down to the store, she finds a cement block on the sidewalk. She throws it through his plate glass window, Murray's restaurant, smashes the big plate glass window down, runs up to her apartment, takes a bottle of pills and kills herself.
Really?
Yeah.
After all that?
After all that trial and travail. I had Ray Barada on the stand. Ray Barada, aren't you supposed to keep the grand jury minutes secretive? Yeah. Tell the judge where you kept it. In this courthouse. Okay, that's a good secret place. Tell us where you kept it, in what room. Judge, do I have to answer that question? Yeah, please answer the question. I kept it in the ladies' room, in a box, cardboard box, all sealed, okay? And that's the way you kept the grand jury minutes secretive from public scrutiny, in the ladies' room, next to the commode? No. So I said, Judge, that's not keeping minutes secretive. That's a public place. That's public. How could it be secretive if it's public? And I got a little nasty. I said, the grand jury minutes, was that on soft paper?
Toilet paper. On the toilet paper.
Oh, yeah, I got a little nasty.
That was good.
That sounds like a very interesting case.
Yeah, that was some case. That was, you remember.
Yeah, I remember.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, another big case I had, not a murder case, but one of the worst tragic events that ever occurred to a client. 12-year-old Barry Rochetta, that lived on the South Crossroad. Her father liked ice boating. Everybody, a lot of Gilberts used to be in ice boating. I think they still are, aren't they?
Sort of, yeah.
So you know what an ice boat looks like. Here's the boat. It has a little side arms here, and then it holds the mast, and it runs on skids, 2 skids. So Richard Richet takes his daughter Barry, who's 12 years of age, down to Orange Lake, where they did a lot of ice boating. And the boat is piloted by a 14-year-old friend. She's 12 now at the time. So there's only one seat just for the pilot. So she's sitting on one of these crossbars. And they're in a cove where the wind was picking up. There was a 16-year-old boy going with his other ice boat. And the wind was blowing them towards one another. And they got those skates on the bottom. So both of them turn the boat. Barry's boat goes this way, and it goes up on one ski. And his boat goes the other way and comes up on one ski. And this other guy, Reed Bielenberg, I think he's still around. He was famous with ice boats. He was 16 at the time. One of his runners hits Barry when she's squatting on this, like this. Hits Barry right in the bottom of her pelvic area, cuts off her anus, her vagina, her clitoris, and her intestines fall right out of her, right onto the ice.
Oh.
So it's, it's hot intestine, sticks to the ice. So she's there dying. Her father's in the house right on the lake there, where they sat waiting. So he gets onto a snow machine and runs over to her and carefully pulls her intestines off the ice with a warm hand. He peeled it up, pushed it back in, took some clothes and pushed everything back into her. Everybody said, she's going to die. She can't. I said, I'm my daughter. She's not going to die. She's not going to die. So they got a helicopter down to Columbia Presbyterian. And they were all ready for her. Staff of doctors were notified. They saved her life. They did years of plastic surgery on her. They couldn't save her anus, so now she got a colostomy bag. But they reconstructed her vagina in parts, to the extent where now she's married. No children, but she's not married.
Amazing.
That was the worst catastrophe I ever had happen to a client.
What year was that?
Must have been sometime in the 80s, I think. In the early 80s, early 80s. What a case that was.
You're amazing. You have some memory.
I do.
Yeah. You're
Not
lucky.
bad for 92.
Oh,
Right.
Very good.
Very
Oh,
good.
I have a good memory, yeah. I'm sharp.
Yeah.
I could tell a lot of jokes too. The other day the sun was out. I come out the door, there's two big black snakes laying there.
Oh.
Oh my God. So I bent down real close, I hear them talking one to another. One says, boy, am I glad I'm a non-poisonous snake. The other snake says, why are you so glad you're a non-poisonous snake? He said, because I just bit my lip.
So you do have kids?
I have two beautiful daughters.
Tell
They
us,
both live-
tell us about your wife. When did you get married?
I got married in February 20th, 1949 in Brooklyn. Beautiful girl. She was just 20, just graduated Hunter College as a school teacher. Very beautiful, nice woman. We were married for 18 years. We had two beautiful daughters who are still around. Her name was Charlotte. Charlotte now, unfortunately, she's 87 and she's in a rest home. She had a few problems. But we still, we got divorced and it was my fault. It was unfortunate, but that's what happened. And we still, after all these years, we divorced, what, 40 years? We still communicate with each other.
That's nice.
I go down to see my daughters, she comes over, and we're still friendly. She sends me a birthday card every year.
Mm-hmm.
So she was a good girl, she was a very beautiful girl, and I was lucky.
What do your daughters do?
Daughter Diane, she's a school teacher. She does that now. She's retired. My other daughter Barbara is a clinical psychologist, and she worked for the state of New York for a while, and now in North Carolina. She's been teaching there psychology for many years. She was just up here last weekend. She flew up to see me.
Where does she live?
In North Carolina. They both live in North Carolina. One in Raleigh, one in Cary.
Nice.
And my daughter Diane, who's married to Jim. Jim is a lawyer, and he worked for the FBI. And I said, "What are you working there for? He was doing clerical work there. He wasn't a lawyer yet." So when they started going together, I said, "Jim, you got to go to law school." I put him through law school.
That's nice.
And I had to move up here, and I took Jim into my law office with me. He and Val worked together. And I bought the old Zebby farm for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know where Zebby lived there?
Yeah, where the Montessori school is today.
Right. So Jim fixed up that building. They lived there for 5 years. And Jim was a lawyer in my firm. My daughter Diane couldn't stand the winters up here. She needed a warmer climate because she had a health problem. And so they moved to North Carolina. I lost them and my 3 beautiful granddaughters to distance. So now we see them every couple of weeks. Skype.
Yeah.
What a beautiful machine that is. I never got to understand it.
Isn't that nice? What'd you say, you're 92?
What's that?
You're
I'm
92?
92, yeah.
Yeah, using
And he's using
Skype.
Skype.
I think that's great.
I think it's great because I still attract 21-year-old girls.
Oh, that's great. You have to tell us a little bit too about the Roosevelts.
Well, the first
How long does this go?
We'll go for a while.
Is John, where's your,
He went to pick up my grandson.
oh, okay.
He'll be back.
You all right on time?
Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm talking too much.
No, but you got to tell us about the Roosevelts.
Well, as you know from your family, my dad was active with the Democrats,
And the Roosevelt Home Club.
and Roosevelt Home Club, he was one of the, you're right there?
Yeah, you're good.
My father, I think, your family were involved with when it was formed,
Mm-hmm.
with Elmer Wagner and Harold Clay
Mm-hmm.
and Roosevelt Clay. So they became active that, and they were pretty much a minority in Hyde Park. Is it coming through all right?
Oh, you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember when Roosevelt would say after the election, with all the people there, he'd say, it's nice to see all of you, but I know you didn't all vote for me.
Oh, I could tell you a little joke about that.
Yeah.
Roosevelt was in Hyde Park running for his 4th term. And he meets a fellow there, a voter in Hyde Park, who he knows is a Republican. So Roosevelt allegedly says to this fellow, "You gonna vote for me?" "No, I'm not, Frank. I'm not. I know you. I know you've been president." He says, "Does this 4th term problem bother you? Because I'm running for 4 terms, which is unprecedented." He says, "That's not what bothers me, Frank. What bothers me is that I'm not going to vote for you because I voted for the Republican the first time you ran. I voted for the Republican the second time you ran. I voted for the Republican the 3rd time you ran. And the 4th time I ran, I'm not going to vote you for you either." Frank says, "Why is that?" He says, "Yeah, I never had it so good."
That's
So
cute.
were you close with the Roosevelts?
Well, I wasn't, but my father and mother were.
Yeah.
I knew them. He knew my brother Sid pretty better than me because I was young yet. And I remember my first thoughts when I think back now is going over to Roosevelt Springwood, and he would come out on the porch there and make a speech, and there was a torchlight parade. I think every year that was torchlight parade, wasn't it?
I think so.
And I admired his speech. Even then, I was still a very young kid, but that's the first memory I have of being at Roosevelt's and seeing him. And when the Roosevelts, when he got inaugurated, you know, in those days, the dates were different for him to take president. It used to take, I think, in March or something, inaugurated in January or something. Anyway, my father and mother got an invite to come down to the inauguration. You know about those things, Patty. And they answered that they can't make it. They couldn't make it because they didn't have the money. This was in the 30s. 2 cents a quart on milk. You can't pay your bills, let alone go down to Washington and spend time overnight in a hotel. So Eleanor Roosevelt found out about that somehow. I don't know how. And she drove out to our old home and visiting for a few minutes there, and she pulled out 2 $20 gold pieces. I think they're 20 or 25, I'm not sure. And she gave one to each one of my father and mother. "Here, you're coming to Washington." She gave me $20 gold pieces each. So they did go. They stayed at the Hotel Willard. It was $8 a night. I think the train fare was about the same. So they had plenty of money to eat with. And they made the trip on Eleanor Roosevelt gold piece.
My mother and her twin sister were there too.
What's that?
They went to, my mother and her twin sister both went to the inauguration.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So
My mother got scarlet fever at one of them.
oh my goodness.
Picked up the scarlet fever. They stayed at the Mayflower Hotel.
Oh, okay.
And when we were down there in 1997 for the Roosevelt Memorial dedication, the trolley guy took us around by the Mayflower Hotel.
Oh my.
And I asked him to stop so I could take the picture of the Mayflower.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother and father used to go, and my
Yeah.
mother's twin sister Elizabeth. So, they were very dedicated to the Roosevelts.
Oh, yes.
I think my mother was the only female president of the Roosevelt Home Club.
I think she was too. She
Towards
was a
the
wonderful
end.
lady. I knew her. She was so personable, almost as good as you. And another big incident was, let me see. Of course, my father was president of Roosevelt Home Club the same way as your mother was, and they always had to lay a wreath on Roosevelt's grave twice a year, no matter what the weather was. May
Memorial Day
and January on
and
birthday.
Yeah.
So I took that over, and I laid the wreaths there on Roosevelt's grave for 20 years. 20 years, I laid 2 wreaths a year. I was very honored to do that. It was very nice.
That was after the Roosevelt Home Club stopped, and you kept doing it,
Right, I kept doing it anyway.
That was great. Yeah, I remember we used to go to Valkill after the ceremonies
Yes.
with Eleanor. She would invite us and send us little invitations to come to tea at Valkill. I still have those.
We went to the Roosevelt site. When I say we, that was my wife Charlotte, mother of my children, and Eleanor was there. Charlotte was then pregnant with my first daughter Diane. So I remember she comes over to Charlotte. She passes on. Oh, good luck. When you going to be due? 2 months. Good luck to you. Eleanor pats her on the stomach and tells her.
Yeah.
Oh, another time, Elmer Van Wagner, Harold Clay, and Moses Smith. They got together with the president. They said, let's go visit Saul Kessler.
Nice.
So I remember Roosevelt drove in with his Ford. He had a convertible Ford where he manipulated with his hands instead of his legs. And my father and Sid and I were in the barn milking. I don't know, I think it was Harold Clay opened the barnyard door. The barnyard gate, rather. May I take this phone, please?
Can you stop that a minute?
Oh, you can't stop?
Call from New York and what?
Oh, that's energy company.
Call from
Yes,
Pam, can you stop it?
thank you.
Can you stop it?
So,
Well, that's somebody selling.
yeah,
Electricity.
sorry about that.
That's okay.
So they got into the barnyard, and Roosevelt drives right in, and the doors were open. It was pretty nice weather. So, hey, Saul, you in there? Oh, my father runs out, and he didn't expect them. Mo Smith is there, and Harold Clay, and Elmer Van Wagner, as I said. And there was a little calf that was just born, maybe a day or 2 old. And Roosevelt says, look at that beautiful calf. Can you bring him out here, Saul, so I can see him? My father picks up the calf and puts him into Roosevelt's lap. The calf had diarrhea.
Uh-oh.
Roosevelt started roaring. Mo Smith started cursing. So we picked up a lot of burlap bags, which we had from the feed, and we cleaned them all off. And you know Moses Smith, he used to curse like a sailor. Every other word was a curse word.
And he was always chewing tobacco.
Yeah.
I remember.
But he was a brainy man. He was very common sense, or maybe uncommon sense. Yeah.
I remember him. When I worked for Ray Hill in the drugstore, he lived next door, Mo Smith. Yeah, he was the treasurer of the Roosevelt Home Club for years and years, I remember.
Of course, Roosevelt used his influence to appoint his son as postmaster.
Right, Arthur Smith.
And he helped out Harold Clay and made him federal housing administrator for northeastern United States. So Harold had a very nice job.
Right.
And then he was...
I have a question. What was the Roosevelt Home Club?
The Roosevelt Home Club was started in 1928. When Roosevelt was governor of New York, he wanted the Hyde Park people to know what was going on in the state, in the country, and in the world. And he had some people come to Albany and decided that they should have a home club, and that's where it really started. In fact, I wrote an article about that for the Dutchess County Historical Society yearbook a few years back. I did some research at the Roosevelt Library with Everetta Kilmer and Tom
my good
Kilmer.
old
And,
Everett. Tom Kilmer, I was thinking of his name too. He used to come out fishing at our pond. He used to catch the little minnows and use them to catch trout.
and when did they start the camp out there? Your camp, the Kessler camp.
Well, it really wasn't a Kessler camp. We had a big farmhouse. So in the summertime, they'd have friends come up from Poughkeepsie or from wherever, and they rent out a room. Like you see a room up here, but it wasn't like that. $25 for the summer, the family would come up there and stay there in a room. $25. So they rent out some rooms, and then there was a lot of people. Well, why can't we stay here too? So my father and brother built a cabin. I helped them too. I did carpentry work, putting on the siding, the roofing on the roof, and so on. So we started renting out cabins. It became known commonly as Kessler's Camp. It really wasn't a camp. We just rented out the cabins like Newman's Cabins.
Mm-hmm. But they came a lot from the city too, from
A
New
lot
York
of people
City.
came from there. They recommended one another.
Mhm.
We had a lot of relatives down there, so they would come up. They paid $35 for a cabin to start with.
Mhm.
We built the cabin ourselves. It was no foundation except held up by stilts.
How many cabins were there?
Well, we started with about 3, and then they expanded when I was going to school yet. Sid and my father built some more. They built them themselves, put in their own electric, their own plumbing, their own sewer system. Everything was done by hand. I used to dig the holes. Because we found an area that was pretty gravelly, so we could scoop out the gravel, and it was good for the sewer system. You know, we had our own well, and you know how we drilled our own well? With a point at the end of a pipe. And we backed up our truck. We had a 20-foot piece of pipe. We dug down by hand as far as we can, put the pipe in with the point on a pointer. It was welded. Maybe Jack Gilbert did the welding, I don't know. And we had a lot of holes in it. And we stand on top of the pipe with a plank on top of it and hit it with a sledgehammer and drive it through the gravel.
Wow.
And then we put a little pump, because it had treads on it, and you put a pump on and pump out all the gravel, and it's all sandy water, and pretty soon a big bulb would form under where the point was, and it would be like an aquifer in there. So that's how we had water for everybody.
Mm,
Phenomenal.
good work.
And my father would know where the water was. He'd have a divining rod. I bet old Walt could have done that too. You hold a willow stick, if it turns down, you know there's water there. And it worked.
My dad used to do that.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Were you born here in Hyde Park too, Pam? You were. What was your maiden name?
Gilbert.
Gilbert.
Who?
She's Jack Gilbert's daughter.
Oh, that's right. I forgot you got married.
It's not Gilbert now. It's Allers.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay.
So when did they sell the camp?
Well, little by little, it's over the years. It had no really starting date. It was done over a period of time.
And then who took it over?
Well, we sold it originally. My father was not well. My father had 3 heart attacks before he died. Over the year, a couple of years, he was not well. We sold it originally to an individual from Poughkeepsie. I don't recall his name, and then he sold it to the church.
Mm-hmm. That's there now?
That's the Reach Out.
Oh, the Reach Out.
Reach Out.
Oh, okay.
The Reach Out. That's was our old farm.
Mm-hmm.
So the cabins were demolished and removed.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what else I could tell you about Roosevelt. Well, he used to write to my father.
Now that's John.
Somebody there?
That's her husband.
Oh.
He's back with
You
the
can let him
grandson.
in.
Oh, thank you.
That thing is still on, so tell us another Roosevelt story.
Okay, I'm trying to think of Roosevelt stories. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, there he is. There's the brains of the family.
Uh-huh.
He got his pad there.
Mhm.
So let's see what I can tell you about Roosevelt. Well,
We missed a lot of good stuff.
the FDR Home Club was pretty active in its time.
Uh-huh.
quite a few people, quite a few, maybe under 50 anyway, but that's active for Hyde Park.
Mm-hmm.
And they would meet at the Roosevelt House at Eleanor's place. She would make tea.
Mm-hmm.
Eleanor would come out at least once a year to talk to some of the people who were staying at her old farmhouse. She'd stand in the barn with the hay coming out of the mow there, standing there. I could still picture her speaking about what was going on in Washington
Mm-hmm.
and filling people in on current events. So Eleanor was a good friend.
I remember her on Memorial Day, where, she'd invite us for tea after the ceremonies
Right.
in the Rose Garden, and she'd have all kinds of goodies on the table in the dining room, and she'd be standing at the one end serving the homemade ice cream.
Yeah.
And when you got around to her, if you told her you wanted vanilla ice cream, she'd ask if you wanted strawberries on it. But if you told her chocolate, she'd never ask you if you wanted
Oh,
the
really?
strawberries.
Didn't go with
So
chocolate.
I realized after I went there a few times, if I wanted the strawberries, I had to tell her vanilla ice cream.
Yeah. Eleanor was quite a lady. She lost her parents before she was 10.
Yes.
Both of her parents died before she was
Mhm.
10.
And right now, that whole Roosevelt Mausoleum
Yes.
up in Tivoli, where her parents are buried,
Yeah.
and her grandparents and her brothers and their children,
Getting
It's in-
deteriorated.
it is deteriorating,
Right.
and no one is doing anything about it.
I remember her brother, Gracie Hall Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm.
He was an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
I remember they used to pick him up on the side of the road drunk. That was her brother.
He's buried there too.
Yeah.
And from what I understand is that the Roosevelt family, years back, gave them a significant donation to keep it up, the
Mhm.
maintenance of it. And the church put it in a general fund and used it for other means.
Well, what
And
else
I
is
think
new?
now the Roosevelt family is going to have to request the church to do some work before it disintegrates.
Mhm.
So,
That's too bad.
So I was always interested in Roosevelt family, and they were friendly. The president wrote to my father yet even when he was governor.
mhm.
This as well as Herbert Lehman used to write letters to my father. And you remember that state trooper that used to guard Roosevelt when he was here now? Donahue was his name?
Yeah. Walt Donahue.
Donahue. I met him some years ago before he died, and told me, he says, I got to tell you something about Roosevelt and your father. Roosevelt was in a home in Hyde Park in Springwood, and your father drove in, and he said, you want to clear me before I go and see Brad? He said, Saul, you could go in any time. Roosevelt told me, Saul, you could come in there. Whenever you come there, you could walk right in. Now, that was a good feeling.
That was nice.
And he was a state trooper who watched the president.
They just sold Eleanor's gun recently.
Oh, really?
That pearl-handled gun.
Mm-hmm.
It was being sold at one of the auction houses in Texas.
Oh, okay.
I think Charlie Kernan,
Yeah.
Eleanor had given it to him, and he gave it to his daughters, and they had it in a safe for quite a while and decided to sell it.
Uh-huh.
So that was just auctioned off. Earl Miller taught her to shoot,
Oh,
the state trooper that was assigned to her.
Let's see, Archie Kernan, wasn't he her chauffeur?
Yes. That was Charlie Kernan's brother.
Right, yeah, I knew Charlie.
Yeah. His Charlie Kernan's daughter Millie lives near me on Park Place.
Oh, okay.
And they all have different names, Snooky and wasn't one Snooky? Didn't they call them different names?
I don't know
I
anything
think
about
they
that.
did. I wanted to ask you, the house that you had your office in over in Hyde Park,
Yes.
was that your house or did you rent?
No, we had another house on the same property.
Oh, okay.
Where I had my office there, that was President Roosevelt's half-brother's house. His half-brother was James Roosevelt.
Oh, okay.
They call him Rosie.
Rosie Roosevelt. That was his half-brother's house, but when his half-brother died, it went back to Franklin. It went into Franklin's estate. And my brother and I bought that property from the Roosevelt estate. And that came about because my father knew the Roosevelts, because when that property went on the market, my brother Sid found out about it, and James Roosevelt, the congressman's son, who was in California, was one of the trustees with Roosevelt's former law partner, Basil O'Connor, who he had appointed to head the March of Dimes. So when that went on the market, we called James Roosevelt in California, and we told him we were interested in buying that property. He was one of the executors of the estate of his father. Helen, what was her name? Helen, who lived there. Helen Astor? I think it was Helen Astor. Anyway, she lived there and she had died in 1962, so that's when it went on the market. So we communicated with James Roosevelt, and he said, well, I'm coming to New York to Basil O'Connor's law office at 120 Broadway in a week or so. He said, we're advertising for bids. I said, okay, we'll put in a bid. What should the bid be? I said, I don't know, make a bid. So anyway, he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. We had an appraisal made of the property. I'll send you a copy of the appraisal. Wasn't that nice? Sent us an appraisal by Ernie Hatfield. Remember Ernie Hatfield? He appraised it. Thank God he was such a good appraiser for us. He appraised that whole property, that mansion, 3 buildings on it, and 145 acres with 1,600 feet of frontage on Route 9 for $150,000.
In 1962?
1963.
Right.
Wow.
Wow, that's pretty good.
So we figured we better go over that. There's going to be plenty of people who want to buy that place for 150 grand. You pay that much for a lot today. So 1963, James Roosevelt said, I'm going to be at Basil O'Connor's law office. Meet me there with your bid. Come in with your bid. So Sid and I went to 120 Broadway in New York City with our bid, but we didn't have the price on it. We didn't feel everything we told what we were buying. The price was up blank, so we got up there and we said to James Roosevelt, and Basil O'Connor was sitting there, and some lawyer for the Chemical Bank who was also a co-executor. And we'd like to fill in a figure here. What do you think of buy this property? We want it. He said, put down 190. We wrote in 190, and they said, bid is yours.
Wow.
That was the favor we got from James Roosevelt because of my father's influence with his father.
That's really good. Do you still own the property?
No, we sold it 2003.
Beautiful piece of property.
Oh,
But
am I sorry I sold it? Absolutely.
who owns it now?
Well, it's all in different, well, now it's the Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt Institute.
Right.
And they let the property go to pot. They haven't painted it since they bought it.
You know who lives there now, right?
Yeah, David.
David Roosevelt.
Right.
Oh, really?
And they haven't painted it yet.
Hmm.
Hasn't been painted in 20 years.
And the house where Sid used to live, Niles Crispell's
Right.
daughter and her
son-in-law.
husband, yeah.
Steve Mittermeier.
they live there.
Right. A nice
Yeah.
couple.
Uh-huh.
Tracy's such a nice girl. You
Mhm.
know her, Tracy.
I know Niles, but I don't know their
Their
children.
Are you all right on time there, John?
Yeah.
I don't know, what else?
It's still going?
It
It's
is
still
still
recording?
going. Yeah, did you have pictures you wanted to show?
I don't know, I got some things I wanted to show you maybe.
So we can
Oh.
do that before. we-
I was active in politics because of Roosevelt. Here's a picture I have with Governor Harriman.
Does that say anything on the back?
No.
Why don't you have it on the back? How are they gonna know who this is? I know this is Governor Harriman, but I didn't,
That's me.
I know, but we should put it on the
here's-
back.
Here's Robert Kennedy and me.
Can I write it on the back very lightly?
Yeah. Yeah, sure, I'm sure.
We need to know who these
I don't
people
know at all.
You know what's going to happen if we don't put the names? We're not going to know who it is.
Albert Kennedy.
It's
Mr. Kessler.
A-V-R-I.
A-V-E-R. A-V-E-R-I.
I-L-L.
L-L. Abraham.
Harriman. Do you have any idea what year this was?
Before he got shot.
Okay, we don't know the year, but take,
And
I'm going
that's
to write
Robert
on the
Kennedy.
back. Robert Kennedy.
A.O. Harriman and Mr. Kessler.
This is what happens in our museum. We get all these pictures and we don't know who in the world they are.
This you recognize. This is Bernard Kessler when I ran for district attorney of Dutchess County against
Wow.
Al Rosenblatt.
You got
Again,
pictures?
again, on this there is no date. Any idea when that is?
Well, I ran against Rosenblatt in 1969.
Okay, I'm going to put that in here, 1969.
Now here's Val Samarco and me at the judge's Law Day dinner. That's Val Samarco.
Valentine, what's his real name?
Val, just name Val. He
Val.
likes Val.
S-U-M-M-A-R-C-O. And this was in
2013.
2013. That's that article that,
Right.
okay.
This is when I was nominated for Supreme Court in
Val
the
Samarco.
5 counties. This was in 1975. That's 40 years ago. I was a little younger then.
Wow. I don't remember when you look like that.
That's a nice picture.
Yeah, you know Val
Yeah, I
Samarco.
do.
This is 1975, when you
Yes.
withdrew from the race? to
Yeah, I was nominated by Dutchess County to run for Supreme Court judge, but that covers 5 counties, and they wouldn't give it to a Dutchess County resident. Westchester and Rockland, you go by committee members,
Mm-hmm.
so they have more committee members to push for a judge. So Dutchess County nominated me, and but Rockland and Westchester
Did not.
did not. They wanted their own man. So I withdrew instead of getting embarrassed. This is, that was my law office.
This is you.
That's Kessler and law
This
office.
was 1975.
Kessler. This is Kessler Road.
Yes.
Kessler Road. Road, Hyde Park.
I could tell you more about the Roosevelt as well. I think he was probably the greatest president the United States ever had.
I do too.
Kessler Road.
Do you know we have the voting machine
His law
in our
office is his
museum
house.
when Roosevelt ran against Hoover in '32, and the ballot is still intact.
Wow. Yeah, I think he did the greatest
That's a
things.
nice picture.
That's a nice picture.
That's beautiful.
Wasn't that called the Red House at one
The
time?
red house, but Sid and I painted it white. It was
You
an
did?
old-fashioned red. It looked like a barn.
And David Roosevelt and his family lives there today.
No, David Roosevelt
Yeah.
is
Is Elliot's son,
son.
FDR's grandson.
This is my granddaughter, Rebecca.
Oh, wow.
She's a ballet dancer. Or she was for many years.
Can I put that on the back?
Sure, Rebecca.
Did she
R-E-B-E.
What's that?
Did she perform all over?
Oh, yes, all through the eastern United States.
It's R-E-B-E-C-C.
R-E-B-E-C-C-A.
C-C.
She even performed at
What?
Radio City.
What is her last name?
Yeager, Y-E-A-G-E-R.
What else you got there?
Oh, just a few. Now, these are when I was sworn in as judge way back in 1982. I have the minutes there, too, which you'll enjoy reading. You can have that too with that.
We're going to put this in our museum.
We
This
got
is
that?
the oath of office to the Honorable Bernard
Rebecca
Kessler,
Yeager.
County Court Judge.
This is a picture of the judges who were at my
His
dinner.
granddaughter, she's a ballet dancer.
That's Jerry Hayes, County Court Judge. That's
Mhm.
Al Rosenblatt. Jim Brands, you
Mhm.
know him. Kessler, Samarco, Pete Foreman, County Court Judge. Frank Morris, City Court Judge.
But you know what? We should put the names on the back.
What for?
Huh?
Doesn't matter. You know, when I'm gone, what's the difference?
No, but we should put the names on the back.
I'll put it on it.
You
know.
will?
Yeah, I'll put it. I know. I know.
That's the problem, you get all these pictures and you
Yeah,
never
but-
know who they are.
You
I
know,
know.
the only one I know is Jerry Hayes, Rosenblatt, Brands,
Right.
you, Samarco,
Pete Foreman,
Foreman, and
Frank Morris, he's City Court Judge. Pete Foreman's a
these
County
two
Court
I
Judge.
don't know.
He just handled a big case. It was in yesterday's paper, Pete Foreman. $1,400,000 settlement.
Okay, but when we write the names, they got to go this way.
Right. I'll do it. I'll do
Okay,
it.
you promise.
I promise. This is, you know, I owned 3 farms at one time,
Uh-huh.
and I built lakes on 2 of them. This is one of the big machines that I operated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a giant size machine.
Here's one of the lakes I built in Columbia County.
Wow.
This
Oh,
way
yeah,
it is.
nice. Great, you built.
In Columbia
This is
County.
me with one of my bulldozers I operate. I had my own bulldozer, my own backhoe, my own front end loader, my tractor, a 10-wheel dump truck. And I operated them all.
Wow.
This is a picture when I was laying a wreath. I don't know when it is.
And the date's here.
Can you see L.A., all those things?
Yeah.
He carried a gun to protect me because I had for a while some tough guys before me. I had one of them was Lemuel Smith.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
He was a big guy, broad like that, and they brought him into my courtroom. He was grumbling like mad. A couple correction officers had a problem with him. His hands were cuffed behind his back. His legs were shackled. So they brought him in, and he's in a fighting mood again. I don't want that guy in my courtroom like that. And Tony's right away pulling his gun. I said, easy, Tony. I said, what's the matter, Mr. Smith, sir? I said, sir? He said, you got me too tight here, Your Honor. I said, unshackle the man. I told him, take those shackles off his legs and unhook him. Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. Fabulous. So I found out you treat these guys nicely, they figure they got a friend. I got to tell you this gross thing. I was sitting in the court with that Haitian girl who slashed her boyfriend across the throat and killed him at the school, Greer School in Millbrook. So I'm on trial with her, and the defense, the case is going on for 2 weeks. And there's going to be a conviction, of course, but the defense is trying. He calls a witness up. Marco Cavilla was defense attorney. He's now the commissioner of elections. So he calls a witness up, and as usual, I'm sitting there, I say to the witness now, please put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand and tell the truth. So up to that. He says, fuck you, Judge. Okay. The jury is there, the correction are all grabbing their guns. I said, take it easy. You don't want to put your hand on the Bible and that's what I do? No, I will not. F you again. I said, okay. Are you going to tell us the truth? He said, sure. I said, that's good enough. Now question him. I say, sit down. He said, fuck you, Judge. Okay, you don't want to sit down? No. So stand. Everybody, all the crowd are grabbing their guns. I said, calm down, fellas. This guy's all right. So he's standing so long on the cross-examination that he got tired of standing. And he shifted his wife from one way to what the defense counsel wanted to do was to create a mistrial. We're 2 weeks into the trial. It cost the state a couple $100,000 already. I'm not going to declare a mistrial. That's what defense counsel wanted. You know, any other judge would say, mistrial. I didn't do that. I said cool and calm. I had another guy who was in the holding tank. He's a big husky guy. He pulled the toilet right out of the floor in the old courthouse. You know, it's only held on by screws. He pulled it out and threw it against the wall. And I said, bring him in. Bring him in. You know, you're not doing so good today, are you, sir? I told him, sir. Yeah, he was ranting and raving. I said, say whatever one you want to say. You want to call me all the names you want, go ahead. You got all the time now. The stenographer's taking everything down. Say whatever you want to say. He kept quiet. And that's what I found out. He could keep people under control. Some judges don't control themselves. They use their authority, their ego, and the power. When you're sitting as a judge and there's a black robe on, you got all 4 races in your hand. You know, so be careful the way you trump people, you know. And then one time I had a well-known bank robber, and when I came in the courtroom, they had all the shades down. I said, why are the shades down? Because this guy, he may have a sniper out there to knock you off, Judge. So I had those problems.
How long did you have the bodyguard?
I had the whole term I was there for a year in county court. When I sat in the Supreme Court and surrogates court and family law, I had no bodyguard.
Did you only have him when you were in court?
In county court. No, he used to drive me. I sat in Rockland County for a while. There was assigned down there to help them clear up their calendar. So Joe Gaillard, the administrative judge, says, they're 4 years behind, Bernie. What can you do to help us out? I said, send me down there. I was down there a month. I settled 104 cases in 1 month. They were 4 years behind.
But did he come home with you too, or?
Oh, he drove me back and forth.
But he didn't come to your house?
No. Well, sometimes he would pick me up in my house. Tony LaRocca, very nice guy. He was a former policeman in the city of Poughkeepsie. He got this political job from Rosenblatt, and Rosenblatt called me and asked me to reappoint him, so I did.
I used to be a Dutchess County Court monitor.
Okay.
When I left IBM.
That was an interesting job.
It was. I was impressed with George Marlowe.
George Marlowe, yeah, he was calm. He's calm. He's still around.
Yeah.
I had the monitors in my courtroom. I had good write-ups from them.
I did that when I left IBM for a while. I don't know.
That woman that was in charge there, I forget her name now. It was a very nice woman who usually ran the show.
We used to fill out the forms and send the reports to New York City. You know.
You did a fine job, the court monitors there. They went into detail on the judges. And if somebody they found doing wrong, they put it down in a nice way.
Did they still do that, Bernie? Do you know?
I don't know. Oh, here's the thing. When I was 4 years of age, we had a little lake outside of our house, and we'd slide down on a sled, go over the ice. This was in February. And my sister Frances was on the sled, steering it with her feet. You know, it was one of these flexible flyers. Sid and I was on it, and go down the hill, onto the ice, goes right through the ice. Goes through the ice. At that time, God saved me. Who's driving by on this dirt road? It's known as East Park Road, Carmel Road, Netherwood Road, got all those names. Was Fred Du Bois and Charlie Veith. They just were coming home from work. Just at the moment, and they looked over, they saw us going down under the ice. It's the only car that goes by every couple of hours. That's all we had a car going by. This was in 1927. I was 4 years of age. They jumped out of the car, both of them. Fred Du Bois runs it. They didn't take off their clothes, just their hats threw up. They had their gloves on, their coats, their boots. They jump in. Fred Du Bois is in trouble. He pulls Frances out. She's hanging on to the ice. She was 10. pulls her out and lays her on there, and then Charlie Veet pulled her further in. But Sid and I are under the water. So he yells to Veet, you gotta help me. So Veet comes in too, all dressed up for the winter time. It was winter time. No heaters in the car. They jump in, they pull Sid out, they go looking for me. The current carried me out of from the hall down towards the dam. They went under the water, 8 feet of water, and they pulled me out. They pulled me out, they turned me upside down, I coughed out all the water. We called old Dr. Kronk. He came out in his old flivver, and he turned us upside down, put us near the stove, and dried us out. I started running around.
4 years
And
old?
God was with me. Yeah, he didn't take the
Is that
story.
from the paper? He was 4 years old.
You got lots of stories, Bernie.
That's
Oh,
great.
people are asking me to write a book. Here's an old packet I rehabilitated.
What
It's a
beautiful car.
1937 Packard sedan. Beautiful car. I ripped it down to the bottom to the chassis. Took every fender off, every piece of chrome, inside upholstery, and I rehabbed it with the same materials they used in 1937.
Still have it?
No, I sold it. I had a lot of cars.
Yeah.
I saved. I had 3 Packards and 1 Jaguar, 4 Cadillacs. I had a guy working full time for me just painting. I had a garage. Look at that car.
Wow.
Isn't that beautiful?
Nice.
Oh, I thought I had a picture of
Too bad
my.
you didn't still have it. We could use it in the parade.
Oh, that's why I used to use it.
Beautiful.
I had a convertible Packard. I used to, whenever Lucille Patterson would be campaigning, I'd drive her around.
Nice.
And you remember Joe Hawkins, the judge?
Mm-hmm.
I drove him in my convertible Eldorado Packard. I want to see who this is.
Call from Rapunzel Terrace.
I want this.
Call from Rapunzel Terrace.
This is the house I built in Columbia County with the lake right in front.
Where's
Now,
the
did you
house?
live in Columbia County?
Well, yeah, it was just a part-time house.
Oh, okay.
Weekends, summer
Seems
home.
like you did a lot in
Hi,
Columbia
this is
County.
Miranda at La Farmville. Just confirming your appointment with Rosemary for 2:15 with Kelly tomorrow. If you can't make it, call us at 229-5454. Thanks. Have a great day.
This is Bill Clinton when he was in Hyde Park. Remember that?
Yeah, at the Roosevelt High School, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what year was that, do you know?
Who is it?
Bill Clinton.
Oh. Oh, I know what you
Here's a picture of 2 of the lakes I built.
1993?
Mm-hmm.
I built those 2 lakes. I stocked them with fish.
Is this in Columbia County or?
Let's see. That's Columbia County. You know, I had bought the old Macy farm. Remember
Steve Macy?
Steve Macy and Francis
On-
Macy
On Quaker Lane?
and Quaker Lane? I bought that farm many years ago. I've sold it now. That was a beautiful farm. I raised beautiful corn there, and I asked Andy Imperati, you know,
Oh, yeah.
he planted corn there for me. And I said, okay, you can use my beautiful soil. There's beautiful topsoil there. I grew corn 12, 13 feet high.
Wow.
And I gave him the corn, and except I said to Andy, I want to cut down maybe about 20 stalks of corn. That was in 1990, October 17, 1990. I ran a fundraiser for Governor Mario Cuomo on my property here in Kessler Drive. I had 1,000 people I entertained. So what I did to have that many people, I got a little sewerage problem. So I hired Johnny on the spots
Mhm.
with water in them and running water and lights. And I took the corn stalks from what I asked Anna, and I took them down. I covered the Johnny on the spots. I put corn all around them like they were in the cornfield. And I had 1,000 people there, and I raised $25,000 for Governor Mario Cuomo. He came down with his wife Matilda and his daughter Maria, who's now an attorney, and we had a lot of people there from all over. So we had a beautiful cornfield out there.
I wanted to ask you about Hyde Park and what you think of the town now as opposed to when you were growing up.
Well, that's a hard question to answer because being a farmer, I was sort of an environmentalist. I love stone walls, I love planting, I like farms, I like creeks. I loved creeks since I was a kid. I used to dig a little tributary off our lake and put minnows in there so I could see them swimming because the water wasn't deep. Well, I used to do that when I was 9 years of age. I used to take a pick and shovel and do that. So I got leanings towards taking care of land, but by the same token, you got to have some progress in a nice way. Listen, when we came here, we threw the Indians off the land, and look what we did to it. And it's true, some species become extinct, but we don't have any dinosaurs around either. We're getting along without them.
That's true.
Right? We're getting along without it. We've got to have progress. I mean, people have to live. People have to have a place to live. People have to make a living. So environmental concerns sometimes should fall by the wayside. Not all. There's a lot of good rules and so on, but it depends upon the reasonableness of people who enforce these rules also. You got to apply the rule of reason. People have to have a place to live.
Yeah.
You know, so when people say, "Oh, don't have any growth," well, where do you live? Before you lived there, the Indians were there, right? And what'd you do to them? You kicked them out and you moved in there. So there's arguments on both sides, and I think you got to use a rule of reason, and you will be successful in keeping people happy.
Do you have any more questions you'd like to ask?
Oh, no. Bernie was very helpful to us for our Town of Hyde Park Historical
I
Society.
think I formed that corporation.
Yes, you did, and we appreciate that.
I know you do. You mentioned it previously.
And
Thank
Bernie
you.
is a life member of our Historical Society, and we're happy to have you.
Thank
And
you.
whenever we have any questions, we always ask you.
Thank you.
And you always come back with the answer, right?
Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Let's see. Sorry I'm taking so much of your time. I wanted to show you. This is me in my courtroom. Oh, this is, I told you I had a Jaguar. Those things never ran. I think in England they run all right, but I don't know about in America. I think that's being towed away to be repaired. That was an XKG 1962 Jaguar.
Hmm?
I see that.
Like that?
I think that's
KG.
about all right. I think that's the same picture they have here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Nice picture.
Yeah, that's from the Bar Association. Oh, on this past March 12th, I was also honored for being the oldest practicing lawyer in Dutchess County.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Tomorrow will be 70 years. The last month, it was March 12th, so I was practicing then almost 70 years. I was one of 11, 10 other lawyers practicing law in Dutchess County for over 50 years, but I was the oldest one.
So you're still practicing?
Yeah, I'm probably going to get it straight pretty soon. Well,
Is that like doctors?
I do consultations now only. I have old clients call me, and I just give them advice on the phone, but I'm not going to court anymore. I'm not fast enough yet. to meet all the young whippersnappers. They'd eat me up, you know.
Oh, yeah, that.
So,
I think he's pretty short.
Yeah, for his age, I would say.
so I was honored. There were 10 other lawyers there over 50 years in May. Unfortunately, I was the first speaker because I was first on the list. I got to tell you what I said. You know, we're limited to speak only 2 minutes, so you got to talk fast. I said, I welcome all the other 10 members who are being honored today, over 50 years in practice. And I've got an idea, fellas, what we're going to do. We're going to form a new law firm. It's going to be called, I read off all the other 10 names, Kessler, and we're going to have one big sign. We're going to say, we're the only law firm between Albany and New York who have 600 years of experience. In fact, Christopher Columbus was our first client. You figure out,
That's pretty
the
good.
11 lawyers, we had over 600 years of legal experience. We'll put up a great bit. 600 years of legal experience. You see in the yellow page, 35 years, 40 years, 25 years. Well, we have 600 years of legal experience, and that was my speech. I cracked everybody up.
That's very cute.
Excellent.
Well, I'm going to wrap this up and
Okay.
say thank you, unless you have anything else you want to show us.
I want to talk to Junior over here.
Well, we'll do that after the
Okay,
camera
after you
roll.
wind this up.
Okay.
But thank you so much.
You're welcome,
I appreciate it
Nice
very
to
much.
see you.
And we enjoyed listening to your story.
As usual, Bernie, we
Thank you,
thank you
Pam.
for everything.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Mm.
Can I see? You want to take that and make
I'll
copies?
take
and you-
the